The very special trophy in Guacamelee 2 requires you to open the gold door, which on face value sounds quite simple. However, this is one beast of a trophy that actually lives up to its name, as it's a special trophy that is key to unlocking several other trophies in the game, but getting this one alone is by no means an easy task. So when playing through the game's story, you will eventually reach a point where you stumble across this hidden chamber full of chickens, and after talking, or rather squawking to them for a while, they will eventually lead you to this giant golden egg-shaped door where they speak of a secret message and a prophecy if you can get through it and reveal what's inside. And in order to get through the door, we need to find the 5 pieces of the key, which are scattered around other levels hidden in these chambers, where we will have to complete a series of hard platforming challenges in order to reach the key pieces. Now, one of these key pieces will be given to you after you defeat the cactus boss, so it's here where you can easily unlock the 1 down trophy for acquiring your first piece of the key. But it's where you have to get the other 4 through these challenge areas where the very special trophy becomes an absolute nightmare, because these are some of the toughest bits in the game in order to get all 5 pieces and unlock this trophy. So when I was playing this, the very first hidden chamber that I discovered with a piece of the door key was the one in the Jade Temple, and unfortunately for me, this was actually the hardest one to actually do, so I was thrown in at the deep end from the very beginning of my attempt to get this trophy, because when you go into this section, it's just an absolute nightmare, and it's a real sort of timed platforming section, because you'll get these bits of portals that are sort of changing the area, switching between the 2 rounds, and the one round will have lava in it, whereas the other one doesn't, which is the blue part of the screen that you can see moving to the right constantly. So you have to keep up with this blue section, all the while doing a series of platform challenges, whether you're running on conveyor belts, jumping, rolling, changing into the chicken, or using the dreaded grapple hook slingshot to propel yourself forward, all the while trying to keep within this blue section, because if you go outside of this, you'll hit the lava and just die instantly. And this was an absolute nightmare to get through, mostly because the slingshot would just constantly fail me throughout the game. I would always be slamming triangle, and often the character would just sort of stretch his arms out but do nothing and never grab the thing, so that would be a cause of many of my deaths throughout this run. And one of the hardest bits with this is just how fast those sections of the screen, the safe zones, move across. And this is a very long section, and it's very trial and error. You'll make some progress, but then you'll reach a point that you just didn't know what to expect. And because the screens are moving so fast, it will just catch you off guard, and you will just naturally die. And then you just reset to the very beginning of this challenge, so you have to do it all in one continuous run, which just makes it a really hard task, because this is just absolute nightmare. You've got to go really fast and hope that the slingshot bits always work for you, and if you fall behind, you can't really wait for another blue section, because you'll just end up getting confused and caught, and something will trip you up and you'll end up hitting the lava and just dying. And it's just a really horrible bit to do. It's definitely, for me, it was the hardest bit. It took me a good 20 odd minutes of just constantly replaying it over and over again to try and get through it. Every now and then making a bit more progress, but then getting caught by another bullshit bit where the game sort of changed up the area, and there was never a rest moment. You've always got to keep moving and keep jumping or climbing or slinging or changing into the chicken or changing back to Wan to be a human again, and it was just really tough, and I just really didn't like it, mainly because the controls would just let me down with that slingshot most of the time, and it will really take a lot of patience, and it's the worst one to do. But I would advise to do it first, because if you can get this one out of the way, the rest of them are easier by comparison. But this one is definitely just the most bullshit bit of this challenge for the very special trophy. Because you'll get to these points on the conveyor belts where you're running, where you've got to go onto the one that's on the wall to take it up to the next section, but then to get to the next section you then got a slingshot, and that will always just let you down. Or there's one where the conveyor belt is going against you, so you've got to use the bird. But when you get there, you won't actually know that until it's too late and the blue section of the screen's gone past and you're just caught with the lava, and it's just a really horrible bit. But when you finally do that after so many attempts, it definitely feels good. And with that, and assuming you've got the cactus boss fight killed as well, and you've got the piece from that, we're now 2 down with just 3 to go. But take a look at this map here, and you can see just how long this course is that you've got to do in one go. Bloody hell. So the second secret chicken key piece that I found was in the treetop section of the game, which was hidden in this room in the Isla Benita area of the game. So it's kind of like a late game area, and for this you have to get past this chicken who's guarding the door by learning the egg lay ability. So once you get through here, we have this climbing section, and if anyone has ever played the first Guacamelee, this section will often be very familiar, as it's a similarly long vertical climbing platforming section to reach the very top of this long winding path, which is kind of similar to one of the hardest bits in the original Guacamelee. But thankfully, this game's version of this, for me and my money, it's a lot more forgiving and it's not as hard as that one, but there's still some very tough, sort of tricky sections that will cause you to be caught out and just have to repeat them again and again. But thankfully there are several checkpoints after you reach certain points in this climb. Once you get to these platforms with the chickens on, you'll get a checkpoint, so you can always go back to there if you fail. So thankfully you haven't got to do the whole climb in one life, because my god, that would just be really tough. And as a result, I would definitely recommend you complete the game, defeat the boss, because it was then respawning you just beforehand, and then you can go and mop up all the collectibles and get all of the power-ups for the human form and the chicken form, because they will definitely help you with these platforming sections. So for me, this was probably the worst part of this climb, as this section where you've got to use those yellow orbs to get your special moves again to then reach these ledges was just really awkward, because you've also got to change the realm by hitting the button to switch between the living and dead worlds. I think that's what it is anyway. And just trying to climb up here with the chicken was just really awkward, because I would always fall short on the ledge, landing at the lower half of each ledge, which meant that my next jump to the next part was even more tricky, and it was just a really tough climb there, and that bit was just really frustrating, and one that I had to repeat over and over again. And then this bit here, you're still not safe, and this bit was tough too, because all you've got to do is slide and then do your Polo strike to get up to the ledge twice to get up there. But when I did it, I just felt short, just the slightest bit short for some reason, which I don't know why. And it's moments like that that just make this trophy and this challenge just feel really bullshit. And I did feel like I was fighting the controls at times, because it just didn't feel like it was responsive half the time. So once you get past there, it does get a little bit easier. This bit here looks intimidating, but it's just a simple special move slide to get to each ledge. So thankfully that bit isn't too bad, but your nerves are going to be racked there, because you're getting quite high up. And I can't remember if there's a checkpoint there, or if you die here you go back to the bit below. I fear you might actually go back to below, so that bit is very tough to get through. So here now you just need to fly with the bird, make sure you hit those yellow balls to get your power moves again, and then switch back to Yan to do your slingshot and just hope that that works and doesn't fail you. And once you do that, you get another checkpoint, thankfully. So now we can progress on with the climb even more, because yes, it's not over yet. So now we need to do a combination of the slingshots and then flicking back and forth between our human and chicken forms in order to slingshot across these obstacles and get up to the platforms. And this bit was kind of easy, to be fair. It's quite lenient, because you can always slingshot again to grab if you kind of fall and miss one. And the checkpoint is only just down there, so it's not too bad to sort of respawn to. Switching the rounds with the bird and then switching back is a little bit finicky, but for the most part this bit wasn't too bad. which I think is thanks to the fact that I'd already played the original Guacamelee twice and done this climb twice, so I was kind of used to how this section already works, and I kind of already gotten the hang of the controls of Guacamelee and the sort of platforming actions that you'll do with your various moves. So I think if you've already done this in the first game, you'll find the second version a lot easier, but if you've never done this before, you're in for a bit of a gruesome climb here to get this piece of the key. But with that down, I can then move on to the next piece and the next challenge. So at this point I had done 2 platforming challenges, and I kind of figured that at some point I would have to come across a sort of combat related challenge, and the one in the Inferno level was exactly that. It was a combat timed based challenge with platforming against my worst enemy in the game, these flying bull things with a timer above the head. So the challenge here is to get through this assault course by killing the enemies within their time limit, because if they explode you die. So you basically have to go through and either punch them or use a special move if they have a coloured outline, and you basically have to traverse this area and take them all out within their time limits. And so if it's a green outline you would do the frog slam, a blue outline you would do this sort of charging forward dash, and a red outline would be an uppercut. But you have to make sure that you don't actually get killed by the course itself, as there are lots of hazards around, and if you use your special moves too much you'll often find that you run out and then you might not be able to reach the next ledge, which is all very annoying. It's very much a trial and error sort of section as you figure out how best to get through it and what move to use in order to take out the enemy and get to the next platform. But once you clear that first area, you do actually get a checkpoint. So this one isn't as bad as that first platforming section because you can do it in stages, so your progress is sort of quicker than what you would do in the other one, because you take bigger strides. This next room, however, was quite challenging as there's a lot going on in this one, and it really does get a bit hectic at times, and it's very easy to die if you miss one of the floating ball things, or if you just accidentally use power up and end up hitting the lava or the spikes. And it's also quite awkward changing around in order to freeze these lava platforms that you need to stand on, so that can be quite tricky. And then once you get up here onto this ledge, it gets even worse because this metal saw blade conveyor belt thing comes out of the wall and starts chasing you through the level, and if that hits you you're just dead. So you have even more pressure now to not only get through it quickly and avoid that, but to get through it quickly and not make any mistakes to kill yourself on like any other hazards. And when you come down into this cave section, the lava starts raising, so you've had that thing chasing you and now the lava is chasing you upwards, making you make even more mistakes. And if you get the timing just off slightly, you can often find you miss certain enemies and end up timing out by their explosion and dying that way. Then when you come through here, you have a load of enemies to kill and you have to make these precise jumps in order to go up the walls, and you'll often find that it's just a nightmare to get through. But once you do, you've just got to kill this enemy, or not, but I prefer to kill him just for being a fucker there watching it. And once you go through there, that is actually it. Surprisingly, that is it. It's quite a short one. That second section though is quite hectic, but I kind of did it quite quick to be fair, so it wasn't as bad as that very first platforming section we did for that first part of the key. So with that done, we can go and find the final piece of the key. Oh boy, what we're going to have to do now, I wonder. So again, to get to this one, you're going to need the flight ability to go across these spikes to get through this blue wall. So it's one that you'll have to do at the end. And once you go through the cave, you'll end up meeting the Jaguar enemy. So this is basically a sort of boss battle, sort of boss rush mode, where you'll be facing off against a bunch of the normal enemies in the game in certain battle chambers, where you have to kill every enemy before you can progress. And this first one is kind of tricky because you have these green shielded enemies which require the frog slam, but if you do the frog slam, you'll notice that the floor you're on is also the green, so it's vulnerable to a frog slam. So if you're not careful, you'll end up frog slamming the enemy and then the floor and falling into the lava below. So the trick here is to actually learn to do the frog slam but then quickly cancel out of that move after you've hit the enemy, so you don't actually hit the floor with it. So you basically have to either do another special move. I use the uppercut to swing myself out of it, or try and jump out of it or something. So once you figure that out and how to deal with that, you can easily get through that section without too much hassle. And then we move on to the next battle chamber, and this one has those sort of voodoo enemies on the outside of this enclosed wall that you're in, and they will sort of supercharge enemies, so they can sort of maybe hit you with like one attack and take off a large chunk of your health. But the only problem here is really that you're in a cramped space, and once you get out, the voodoo enemies are quite tricky because I hate their little magic attacks that they do. But once you kill them, it's not too bad. There's a couple more boss sections that you go through, but they're quite easy, to be honest. Those first two are probably the hardest ones until you get to the end, that is when you go up against Jaguar himself. So it starts off as a one-on-one battle, and he will have various coloured shields that you need to smash by doing the various special moves that you have, and then you can just attack him and wail on him. And after you beat him up a little bit and smack him around, he will summon some reinforcements, which is himself from another world in the Mexiverse. So you're now facing 2 Jaguars instead of 1, and you'll often find they both have different coloured shields at the same time. And as they're doing the same moves as each other, you can often find that it starts to get a bit hairy, but it's not too bad. And after beating them up a little bit, they will call in a third one, and it's here when you face off against 3 of them at the same time that things do start to get a bit more tricky, as you now don't really have any breathing room whatsoever, because if one of them isn't attacking you, you can pretty much guarantee that the other 2 are, and while that third one is away from you, he's probably charging up a special move to allow him to shoot across the screen, so you kind of have to watch everyone and just try and scramble and just take a few jabs on them at a time before getting out of there, before they just swarm you. And if you start to lose health here, it can be really tricky to get into space to be able to press down and heal with one of those upgraded moves, so you definitely need that move when you come into this fight, because otherwise you're in for a tough time. You need to try and focus on one at a time to try and take out one first. That is easier said than done, as like I said, they will all be swarming you, and they will often have different coloured shields, and it'll be quite tricky to just figure out what's going on. And when you're low on health, it's just a desperate struggle to try and get into a corner to try and heal and hope that none of them come over to attack you. But it can be done, and you can do it. And once you take out the first Jaguar and you go down to just 2 attacking you at once, it does get a lot easier, and it's very much a battle that sort of starts off really hard when there's 3 of them, but the more time goes by with this battle, it does get easier and easier as it goes on. And once you take out the second one, well, it's just a simple fight then, a one-on-one fight against the last remaining Jaguar, who's probably still got a fair bit of health. But you know all the moves by this point, so it's not really that much of a big fight. And after killing all 3 of them, you will unlock the moves like Jaguar Silver Trophy for taking those out. So that's another trophy you've earned after going for the very special trophy. So you kind of see what I mean when this is like the key trophy to unlocking several other trophies in the game, as we've now unlocked 2. And now we can go and get our final piece of the key, which is just a few more screens away, and now we've finally done it. So with all of the key pieces collected, we can now head back into the Crucible from the prison level and return to this hidden area and finally unlock that door and earn the very special trophy. So after returning, we get a short cutscene that plays out where they talk about this important door and the special message that lies within. And as the doors open, we see that there is another door within this room, but thankfully we don't need to get another key for this. But what actually lies beyond this next important door? What awesome treasures will lie in there for us? Well, unfortunately, it's nothing good, because what lies in here is a series of even more frustrating platforming sections where this time we have to always use the chicken to try and get through a series of rooms with some of the most annoying, tricky and finicky platforming bits in the entire game. If you thought the very special sections were annoying, well, I think these are even more frustrating. Even though there are a lot of checkpoints, these are some tricky and awkward sections to get through without getting hit, because if you once that's it, you're out of there, and you've got to restart that section again. My god, some of these are really, really obnoxiously bullshit. But for me, this bit here with these lava platforms was the hardest bit, because I failed this multiple times, again and again, and I was stuck here for ages. So you basically have to use your Apollo slide move as well as the realm shift move in order to switch the platform, so that the one you're going to turns into a rock, and the one that you were standing on then turns into the lava. So you sort of alternating back and forth, but you've got a very split second in order to do your slide, and the realm shift in order to freeze the platform you're going to. And it's just really awkward, because I'd always do it on the very first one and lose too much of the ledge, because as you're switching between and going to each platform, the ledge that you're going to is then always getting lower and lower, and by the time you get to the last one, it's often too far down into the lava for you to get through, and that one was just an absolute ball ache to get through. It was a really tough section, and then after that you've still got a load more areas to get through there that are also quite awkward and finicky, but eventually you'll get through them, and that is where you'll end up earning the silver taught to the hand trophy for learning what the secret message was. And unfortunately, it's quite shit, to be honest, and it was a bit of a disappointment to actually get through all of this, doing all of those platforming sections for the very special trophy to get all the keys to unlock the door, and then when you do get through the door, you're faced with even more bullshit platforming sections to then just get a really shitty reward. To be honest, that just wasn't really that worth it, as all I had left to do then was to defeat the final boss once more with this special message in order to unlock the Legends of the Timeline trophy for the good ending. So while the very special trophy is key to getting a bunch of the other trophies and the platinum in the game, it still left a bitter taste in my mouth after getting it, because I had suffered through all of those bullshit trial and error platforming sections, some of the hardest platforming bits in the game that were just really frustrating to get through, only to find once the door opened that there was another portal inside that led to even more frustrating platforming sections, and the whole thing just didn't really feel worth it. The special message wasn't funny, and the reward you got just wasn't worth it, and for that reason, the very special trophy gets a bullshit trophy rating of
bullshit, bullshit, bullshit,
bullshit. You said so bullshit.
Oh shit!